From Lucas's bedroom to a jail cell somewhere near you, this is Hot Mike Episode 5. You ever watch those pedophile catching shows on YouTube? This is a shout out to People vs. Preds. He's probably the best out there. No mercy on the pedophiles, goes in, head first, no nonsense. But there's a continuous trend among his videos that if you don't even really have to pay attention to notice it. More often than not, the cops are trying to pinch the guy who's catching the pedophile rather than the pedophile themselves. They're more interested in talking to him and trying to talk him into a corner and implicating himself on doing something illegal than it is for them to investigate the pedophile. Some of these guys are even registered sex offenders, and yet they're more interested in PvP than them. We're a long ways from Norman Rockwell's The Runaway in the days of cops being parts of the community in any important aspect. And I'm going to hear it already from the thin blue line retards. Oh, what are you going to do when someone breaks in your house? You're going to call the cops. Listen, what does it say when a cop is more interested in trying to pinch the pedo catcher than the pedophile? What does it say about our culture? These cops obviously have a quota they have to fill. And on the balance of what weighs more, is it pedophile catching, or is it trying to pinch someone in potential assault, potential battery charges, maybe they can get an arrest? When they're more interested in the pedo catcher because maybe they have more of a chance of actually getting an arrest or something with a DA, to them it's not the severity of the crime and the impact on the community, it's what gets my quota filled. Societies die when people forget very obvious things. The next generation is tied up in children, and if you have no children, your tribe has no future. What went wrong? That the most obvious thing for thousands of years, if you have someone who harms your children, who harms your prospects at survival of a species, is killed, is done away with no tolerance. That not only is this not the case anymore, but more often than not, these pedophiles get a slap on the wrist and are sent away. You've got pedophiles teaching in schools now. Teachers can go around and talk to their kids about their sex lives, and parents don't even bat an eye. They're doing it out in the open. Another thing they've forgotten is what a police force is for. It seems to me that if you go on the Twitter pages of some of these police precincts, they're more interested in showing the newest Rainbow Squad car or the various quote-unquote weapons that they've found in the case of a lot of British police departments. They'll put up a picture of a couple bike pumps, a rusty knife, a potato peeler, and claim they're doing a part for the community. But what are the police for? These are people who are supposed to be living in the community they are policing, making sure the laws are being done, making sure that the neighborhood is safe at night, that kids can walk to school, that people can go outside without fear of being mugged. A very important job, absolutely. And here are these guys showing up to the calls when they actually do in the case of PvP. Hanging around after taking 45 minutes and then finally arriving, they sit there talking to them, chewing gum with their mouths open, with their Punisher patch on their vest. And you'll notice the verbiage they use. Despite the fact that they're talking with this guy who's taking time out of his life to make sure that children are safe in the community, whether or not these cops have children or not, living in the same community, you have to pay attention to the language they use. This man is doing a service for them, and I don't care how many dead bodies you come across. I don't care how much bullshit you see on the job or at home. This man is doing a serious service to his community, and yet the language they use when speaking to him and those like him are, you're entrapping people, you're setting them up, we get what you're doing here, as if he's guilty already of something. No matter who they talk to, someone's guilty of something. Someone's going to go away in handcuffs, or if he isn't, certainly the pedophile isn't. But I think that the main takeaway between this, particularly in the last episode of PvP where he had to pepper spray a registered sex offender, I'm fairly certain. Let me actually check. So, when he had to pepper spray the guy who had charged at him, getting ready to attack him, there's something to be said that this job, the safety of the community, if you have no let's just say, non-governmental enforcement hinges upon these people's jobs. And they view those who do harm to the most innocent among a community, pedophiles, potential sex offenders, child molesters, and maybe an arrest they can get for assault or battery. They're going to go after what they think they can get an arrest for. They're not there to do a job. They're just another corporate shill. When you remove the important aspects of what a police is to a community and they're just there filling a pair of shoes on some bullshit patrol, showing up, not doing anything to protect their communities, what's the difference between a cop who's there just for a paycheck and some white-collar worker who types away at keys all day in a cubicle? What, that one has to show up potentially on a dangerous call where he'll shoot up someone's dog and then claim self-defense? Perhaps some of you guys have seen the video of the cops apprehending a suspect at Home Depot. Guy in a rascal scooter holding a knife. Crippled, probably paraplegic or quadriplegic, can't move around too well. And big asshole cop, big swinging dick cop, instead of doing his job of protecting and serving or whatever you want to say, his first response to a guy in a wheelchair who can't move around, who can't swing his arms, is to empty his magazine into the guy's head, shoot him something like 9 times in the back of his head. That man who may for all intents and purposes been a piece of shit, if it was your son who just had a bad day, or perhaps grandpa had a couple screws loose, instead of doing what would have been easy and disarming the guy, he treated him no different than a corporate shill would a stapler or a computer or a couple stacks of papers in the office. The role of a police presence in any town or any community signifies some sense of spiritual health, some sense of cohesion in a community. If you don't have a police force, it means that this community, this group of people living in a town, don't give enough of a shit for each other, for their kids, for the community, that they want to make sure the streets are safe, that their environment is a safe place for kids to grow up. What do communities without police look like? Well, Brazil, Africa, other places like this. You have no future in places like this. If you don't make the soil good for roots, as we've said before, your roots will determine your fruits. So this organization of a police force in a community being reduced to something not that much spiritually different than a white-collar worker in some office somewhere signifies another step towards the corporate nation-state. Cops with no sense of spiritual purpose, those who wear a badge and a gun and do what they're told because they view it no different than a job, will enforce anything. This is certainly nothing new if you're on this side of the political spectrum and you pay attention at all. But I suppose that every once in a while things do need to be said, even if they've been said 100 times. You've heard it already, and most often you hear it from retards who call themselves conservative and still use the word because they haven't learned yet that it means nothing. The cops and the army are supposedly filled with those who are conservative, who vote for Republicans, who wear their MAGA hats proud, go to the 4th of July party, light off fireworks because they're good old American boys. If your cops are showing up on location and they'd rather pinch a guy trying to stop pedophiles from molesting your community's children, what makes you think they're going to do anything to help you when it actually matters? These guys who show up for a paycheck, when the Floyd riots hit your town, when they hit your local city, where were your cops? If they can't show up to protect children, those the most innocent among us, what are they going to do to help you? I can assure you one thing. When it's nice and quiet, a cop won't hesitate even for a second that if there were some mandate to take away your weapons, to take away your house because the IRS put a lien on your house, those officers wouldn't hesitate to go in and put cuffs on you because they have a permission slip to do it. They'll get an arrest, and you'll comply. They'll get their pension, and they won't give a shit what happens to you. High time preference or low time preference. I'd have to imagine a group of people who would rather get an arrest today than stop a pedophile tomorrow, or a group of people who want it now. So let's connect this story with another. When your parents get old enough to be put in a nursing home and you don't have money to make sure they're put in a decent place other than some state-run facility, they're going to be thrown in with the likes of this man, a black guy in his 20s named Jaden Hayden. No, I'm not making that name up. Who is he? About 2 years ago, in 2020, there was a video that surfaced on YouTube and passed around the usual areas. It was a black guy in a nursing home who set up his phone and was beating the shit out of a 75-year-old man. Because his skin was lighter than him, though the 75-year-old man was not white, he could pass for it in the eyes of this gorilla. He videotaped himself beating the shit out of him until he bled out of his head. What happened to him? 2 years later, all the charges were dropped against Mr. Jaden Hayden. With the details, whether or not he was working there or he happened to be there because he was released from some facility because of COVID, it doesn't matter. He implicated himself in a serious battery crime, recording himself, turning on his own camera, beating the shit out of a 75-year-old man, until he bled from his head, and 2 months later that man died. All charges dismissed against him in court. Why? I think for one it's safe to say that because he's one of the sacred cows of America, that might have something to do with it. Cops need to get paid, and for them to get paid they have to make arrests and quote-unquote do their job. If they're not making arrests, ones that'll go through, they're not needed anymore, they get let go. And when they see that they can't arrest certain colors of people, when they see that these cases don't go anywhere, they're going to show up to your door when some black guy breaks into your mom's house and rapes her at night, slits her throat. And they're going to arrive there in their squad car, chewing gum with their mouth open, looking like they have better things to do. And they're going to say, sorry, we can't help you. Not interested. At the end of the day, too, as stupid as they tend to be, they're smart enough to realize that policing in certain proper ways will end with the ruination of their lives and the lives of their spouses and children. Case in point, Derek Chauvin. I'm not going to sit here and wax apologetics for some retard in a blue uniform, but let's look at the details. He could have did what he did and pulled George Floyd out of the back of the squad car as Floyd's having an overdose, and obviously he's in the crowd of a bunch of black people who are known to be very violent, with his knee on the back of George Floyd's shoulder blade. And George Floyd, a man big enough to keep 3 cops from putting him in the back of a squad car, is not going to be let go and let loose in case he does come back high on narcotics. And so, he overdoses and dies on the ground. Or, he could have left him in the squad car, ignored him, drive to the PD, and had Floyd overdose on the road, in which case the things would have looked much the same. Chauvin and his friends would have been the racist KKK cops that let the poor black man die of an overdose, neglected in the back seat, just like they had been for 300 years. They've been neglected by the white man. And the outcome would have been the same. Or, Chauvin could have done what the new norm is. You get a call about a black guy causing trouble. Had he just decided, I'm not going to show up. I'm not going to show up to that call, and if I do show up, it'll be an hour and a half from now, when everyone's already gone. That man would still have his job, he would still be out of prison, and he wouldn't be in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day. He wouldn't have been divorced, and his spouse would have still had a husband. By the very nature that a majority of crime is committed by people with dark skins, let's just say, the profession becomes a very dangerous place for white people. Anything they do is put under a very close lens, and the smallest of mistakes leads to a lifetime completely ruined. Naturally, anyone intelligent, naturally anyone who gives a shit about their community, naturally anyone who cares about their people aren't going to volunteer to be a paid militia on behalf of a certain tribe who wishes to use and abuse the police force for their own ends, aren't going to join the force. What does that mean? It's a self-perpetuating issue that means Stupid brown people will be taking over a very important integral position in society, that of maintaining peace, law, and order. As more of these low IQ idiots take over this position, the state of the law in this country will continue to degrade. The further down it goes, the less likely you're going to have decent people joining. It's a cycle, a self-perpetuating issue. Then you get problems like this. When you get a police force full of dumb brown people, you get a police force that do stupid things like this. Stun gun used during arrest leads to gas station fire that burned 3 deputies and suspect, witnesses say. Before we continue, as a cop, is your job to go out and kill whoever you see fit? Perhaps today in the age of the Great Replacement, the answer is yes, some of the time. But you know better than that, and so do I. What leads a cop who is doing an arrest at a gas station to take out his stun gun and shoot it at someone who's pumping gas? I suppose it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, justice will be done because the sheriff's office is investigating it. But of course, this investigation includes the fire marshal and, quote, it could take weeks. I'm sure these guys will get their justice. Because the guy who was tasered while pumping gas now no longer has function of his legs. He's totally burned. His life is destroyed. Was justice done? Did the cops do their job? Well, they showed up, deployed their taser, and got to tase someone. They're getting paid vacation time, I'm sure, right now. But how is this any different than any of these pedophile catchers? Cops show up looking for some action. Perhaps they'll get some kind of arrest. Nothing of consequence is actually done. No one's saved. They're not a hero. They're not rescuing anyone from a burning building. They're not saving any child from pedophiles. But they sure want to go after the guy who woke them up in their squad car after dispatch called them and said, hey, you need to get up and actually do your job now. Let's switch gears for a minute. I only want to talk about this next topic for a couple of minutes. Reasons being this particular topic, after already covering something, is draining. It makes me very tired, to be honest. The reason why it makes me tired is because of the severity of the issue and the fact that 70 to 80% of the people implicated in this issue don't care. That is the Great Replacement, the death of the white race. Now, if the white race is replaced as the majority in Europe and America, by nature of what white is, it will not come back. These various races, such as Arab, African, Asian even, you can mix other things in there and still contain a majority of these races in your phenotype. Once you mix something with white people, that goes. It's gone. In previous times where there were foreigners mixing with white people, like that of perhaps Sicilians, the geographical distance between the two groups of these races was not so extreme as what we have now. In America and Europe, we are facilitating the mixing of Nordic races, far northern Europeans, with sub-Saharan Africans. Imagine mixing a Great Dane and a Chihuahua and thinking that the offspring of this extreme will be healthy, will be good or generative. Perhaps in a future episode I'll talk more about what exactly the Great Replacement means, what we can do about it, which I'm very handicapped on what I can talk about on this platform especially. Maybe other things too. But what I want to talk about in regards to the Great Replacement is its severity. The severity of the circumstances. What it means. We've known about the Great Replacement at least for 70 years. Those of us on the right wing have known about the Kaufman Plan, the Morgenthau Plan, the Kalergi Plan. Our parents, their parents, they knew about it. Hell, even Patton knew about it, and they killed him for it. But we've known about the Great Replacement for a very long time. I'm warning my listeners, all 30 of you, all 7 of you that actually listen from beginning to end and will even be listening so far as to hear what I'm saying right now, don't do what the right wing did in 2016. What do I mean by that? In 2016, you had the alt-right parroting anti-feminist talking points. Things that since 2014 were already settled, done, the debates were had, the topics were dead. Settled. Gone. Done. And here comes a faggot like Milo Yiannopoulos. Here comes some retards who really have nothing to contribute, but they're parroting the same talking points that have been going on for 3, 4, 5 years already before them. And all the people on the right wing said, "Oh, it's one of them, we have our own now." And they celebrated as if they were actually doing something, when they were actually regressing the movement back years, taking them back to fights that had already been fought, and taking away energy from fights that needed to be fought then. The Great Replacement is being talked about. No, I'm not going to use that verb. The Great Replacement is being mentioned by some Republicans who are the enemy, and by people like Tucker Carlson on Fox News. We have known about this to such an extreme extent for 10 years that bringing it up on the news 10 years too late is not going to do anything for us. We cannot celebrate or parade about this, because what does it mean? It means our opposition knows that their plan has been done to such an extent now that by not mentioning they're replacing us, that they're trying to genocide the white race, they will be doing more harm to their own plan than good. By not mentioning it and pretending it doesn't exist, they might inspire more radicalism, and I don't even want to use that word, I want to say common sense in the average person. When they look around and they say, hey, no one's even talking about how my neighborhood, which was safe and white 10 years ago, is now brown and hell. And no one in the system is talking about it. No one who I vote for is mentioning it. No one who I vote for is doing anything about it. It removes hope in the system. The fact that they're having their shills on mainstream media mentioning it now means that they've gotten as far as they have. It means they've made some serious progress in their plan. Tucker Carlson, who wears a red Kabbalah bracelet on his wrist, Tucker Carlson, who is on a legacy mainstream media platform directed mostly at boomers, if he's mentioning it, that's a bad sign. It means it's seriously taken root. But we already knew this. The severity is what I want to talk about. You have to understand that life, even if now you are sitting in an air-conditioned room listening to my voice over your Wi-Fi connection wirelessly into your telephone or your computer, that your breath, your heartbeat, your thought, your soul is the same existence that your ancestors had 10,000 years ago, whether they were in some kind of thatched roof hut or if they were in a stone castle. The consequences of life for us is the same as it was 10,000 years ago for them. If you die, you're done on this plane of existence. If you lose and your tribe is gone, you're dead. Life is not a baseball game where you can lose a game, shake hands, and say, we'll try again next week. If the white man is taken to such an extreme with birth rates, with migration, with miscegenation, that mathematically and statistically he cannot come back, if we allow ourselves to get to this point, it is over. You don't get a second chance. The circumstances environmentally and spiritually that led to the creation of the Aryan race, the one that had created all the glories that brought Christianity to the world, that built architecture unparalleled in any corner of the world, that created the best weapons, transport systems, communications, modern miracles, and medicine, all of those circumstances that led to that creation, statistically speaking, will not happen again. We are fighting for our very existence. The other races on the world are not as kind as the white man. When we conquered the Indians, we had something that they didn't: compassion. When an Indian conquered another Indian tribe, they wiped them out. They genocided them. There was no reservation system. If the other tribe was lucky, they would have survived through slavery. But that wasn't always the case. When we are made into a minority, when we lose that fight and we can't come back through birth rates, whether it's the Chinese, the African, or the Arab that has their boot on our throat, will step down like we haven't to any other group of people in our European history. They will crush our throats utterly, and we will be gone. Tens of thousands of years of men with the same blood as you fought each other and the outside world for the survival of the European race, for the growth and expansion of their empires, for the betterment of their societies, and for the lives of their children. 10,000 years for all of that effort. And sure, in a single generation, almost all of it has gone to waste. The boomers have sold their white children into slavery to the globalist Jewish order. But the white race isn't dead yet. I am warning you, though. Don't just celebrate and parade around because you're hearing about your own extinction being mentioned in the mainstream news, so you have hope that maybe from within the system a great man will rise. From within the Jewish system, nothing good for other tribes will come about. We still have time, but not much. There are no do-overs. Just because we settle some stupid conflicts internationally now with two stooges controlled by the same banker talking it out on a podium, or having some kind of democratic vote instead of coming at each other with swords and spilling each other's blood on the battlefield, doesn't mean that the consequences are any different. When our race is gone, it will be gone. How do you get new generations of white people? By protecting your children. Unless we do something about the elements in our communities that serve to protect the next generation, such as the police, we are not long for this world. I just had something come across my news banner. American girls are now reaching puberty as young as 6, a phenomenon scientists think may be linked to childhood obesity, chemicals in plastic, and stress. The food that our children are eating is poisoned. The schools we're forcing our children to go to are molesting them. We are letting our children onto social media platforms that glorifies a niggerfied culture and a sodomitic spirit. Our children, who are the next generation, are being raised in a house without two parents to show them proper dynamics between the sexes, healthy dynamics that lead to good children. And those who are given a badge and entrusted with the duty of protecting children and making sure that their communities are safe are not doing their job. They would rather try to go after a man stopping pedophiles than to arrest the pedophile, because they might have an easier time getting an arrest for their quota going after the man who pepper sprayed a pedophile trying to attack him. Those who have put us in this position where our children are in such dire straits know what they did. Your children are your roots of tomorrow. Your roots determine your fruits. Our roots are being sprayed with pesticides, poisons, they're being burned, they're being chopped up, and they're being ready to be thrown into the great belly of the beast Moloch. We have a lot to do to try to reverse this, and it is still possible, but we have to start acting sooner rather than later. We are at war. You just don't realize it yet. Who's our general? I can tell you one that'll work pretty well. The leader that led the European to such great heights before. We have been without God for 100 years now. We've been steeping in the euphoria of our own atheistic humanism, Instead of saying we need to work on ourselves and improve, we say that our faults are what makes us human. That our divorces are experiences that are good in some way, shape, or form. That they're a sign that we're human because we're imperfect. And that that's good in and of itself. Our humanism has led to the deconstruction of every cog in our community that is important, such as a police force. It has removed the spiritual component of what a cop is. An enforcer of justice, an enforcer of good. We've lacked an eternal standard of goodness for so long that these police are willing to enforce any standard of what is quote-unquote good, because we have no standards. Whoever steps up and can pay out to the highest bidder of what our standards need to be will have control of these golems in blue costumes. The cops are the guards of our city, but no one watches the guards. They have no standard. Unless the Lord guards the city, those who guard it stay awake in vain. This has been Tales from America's Hot Mic, Episode 5. Hail Christ, hail victory, and I'll see you next time.